Welcome, everybody. I hereby call this June special town meeting for the town of Hanson to order. If you could please all rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. We have just a few people still registering and coming into the hall, but that's fine. If everybody could please get a seat. And once again, if visitors could all be in the visitors section, that would be very helpful. Once again, my name is Sean Keeley. I'm the elected town moderator for the town of Hanson. To my left is the Finance Committee. They're the ones that write the budget that we voted on back in May. I'm sorry, did I say to my right? To my left is the FinCom. That's right. Stage directions. To my right is the Board of Selectmen. Behind me are the various town officers, some of whom we may be asked, to come to the podium and speak to answer questions, including Lisa Green, our town administrator, and Kate Federoff, who is our town council. So, what's going to happen today? Well, first of all, couple of small points. The rules of the town meeting are from town meeting time, which is the official guide of the Massachusetts Moderators Association. And if I could make a motion to determine the quantum of vote, that would be very helpful to me. Sometimes votes require a 2/3 or a 9/10 vote. I will make my best guess at whether or not that's been accomplished. But if anybody disagrees with me, and people have plenty of times in the past, we will go to a recorded vote where everybody raises their blue cards. You just have to say, I disagree with the decision. But I will therefore make a motion that the moderator be allowed to determine the quantum of votes. Seconded. Thank you very much. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Just a few words about decorum. Last meeting was a difficult one. And I know people were very passionate about various issues, and I tried to provide as much space as possible to have a debate. But I just wanted to point out a few things. Please, if you want to speak, go to the microphone. If you have trouble getting to the microphone, indicate that to me in some way, and we will bring the microphone to you. When you ask your question, please start by saying your name and street, and even if you think I should know it. It's a little intimidating to have this many people in front of me. Please direct all your comments through me as moderator to the town meeting. I do not want to have people talking past each other or to each other, and rather than to the meeting itself. Please keep all comments that you might want to make them formally at the microphone. Please refrain from outbursts or statements without being recognized. This is just going to make things much more efficient and allow everybody to be heard. We also had an incident at the last meeting of somebody introducing themselves with a fictitious name. Please don't do that. It makes things very difficult. If somebody uses a name that I don't believe is their correct name, I'll ask the town clerk if that person is registered in the town. If they're not, I won't recognize them. So thank you very much for your cooperation. And hopefully we will have an efficient town meeting anyways. That's my hope. So the article that was presented in the warrant was, in my humble opinion, a bit confusing. So what I'm going to do is make a motion, and then if that motion passes, then we don't have to move on to any other motions. But bear with me here. We're going to make sure everything is done legally here. So, Article 1. I move to reject the reassessment submitted by the Regional School Committee and reaffirm the budget as originally approved in Article 5 of the May 6, 2024 Annual Town Meeting, as printed as Option 1, Column 2 of the budget handout. Seconded. This article refers to the fiscal year 25 annual budget lines. The budget must be reviewed and approved again because the school committee resubmitted its full assessment after the full budget was rejected by town meeting and the override failed. So here's the explanation that is printed in the warrant. The town of Hanson received a $14,974,735 operational assessment from the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District for the fiscal year 2025 annual budget. The town of Hanson budgeted for a fiscal year 2025 Regional School District operational assessment of $14,602,595. At the annual town meeting held on May 6, 2024, town meeting was asked to fund $14,602,595 in the fiscal year 2025 Regional School District operational assessment as part of the overall budget via Article 5, and to consider funding the remaining $372,141, the delta between what Hanson was assessed and what was budgeted, through an operational override via Article 6. At the May 6, 2024 annual town meeting, the town approved the budget in Article 5, which included $14,602,595 for the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District operational assessment, but it did not approve the override for $372,141 in Article 6. Failure to approve the additional funding in Article 6 resulted in the overall rejection of the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District operational assessment. As a result of the May 6, 2024 annual town meeting rejection, Whitman-Hanson Regional School District School Committee was required to reconsider their operational assessment. At its May 8, 2024 meeting, the Regional School District School Committee voted to keep the operational assessment at the same amount and resubmitted the school assessment of $14,974,735 for this town meeting's consideration. The purpose of, one moment. Well, and the purpose of my motion just a moment ago is to determine whether or not we as a town want to reassess the this requirement or this amount of money from the school committee. If you vote yes, then you are voting to reject the reassessment, and basically the town meeting is over. If you vote no and the motion fails, then what we'll do is we'll move to another motion which will reopen the budget and we'll find a way to fund the school's assessment. So would anybody, is that confusing?
Yes or no? Yes.
We tried so hard. If you vote yes on this motion, you reject the reassessment submitted by the Regional School Committee, and the budget stays exactly the way it was in May. If you vote no, then, and the article fail, or the motion fails, then I'll make a new motion which will reopen the budget and will allow us to debate how we're going to fund that school assessment. All right? Is that better? Great. Thank you. Would anybody like to, we have a motion and it's been seconded. Anyone who would like to debate, please come to the microphones. Oh, Ms. Kemet. Yeah, please come to the podium.
Thank you. Thanks for that explanation. So we've got essentially three choices before us. So approve the reduced budget for the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District as previously approved at our May 6th annual town meeting, which would be sent back to the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District School Committee, who would determine whether to accept the reduced amount or reject it and force potentially a district-wide meeting. Approve the full school assessment with reduced services in the town's budget, or approve such other budget as may be deliberated by town meeting. Each of these options has pros and cons, and it's up to everyone tonight to decide which options pros outweigh its cons and vote accordingly. For the first option, if voters want to make no cuts to the town budget and/or staff and want to fund the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District budget at the same amount that we budgeted and that town meeting appropriated at our 5/6/24 town meeting, voting aye for option number 1 will achieve that. As I mentioned, that will mean that this issue will once again go back to the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District School Committee to reconsider their operational assessment to the towns. If the school committee reaffirms the operational assessment, then a super town meeting of both towns will be required to vote on the operational assessment. If the operational assessment is not lowered or a super town meeting does not happen before the end of June, then the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District cannot set a budget by June 30th, and that will put the district under a 1/12th budget, meaning that they will be operating off of last year's budget on a month-to-month basis. This will require over $2.5 million worth of cuts and layoffs until the budget is set. So that's option 1. Option 2, approve the full school assessment with reduced services in the town's budget. Now, as Mr. Keeley indicated, if option 1 is not overwhelmingly approved, then we move to option 2. And to be clear, because we did not vote to approve an override both at the ballot and at town meeting, the only way to fully fund the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District is by cutting positions and using other sources of one-time money. Voting aye for option number 2 will achieve that in the short term. The informational warrant has got some details on the proposed budgets from the Select Board and from the FinCom. We're aligned on that. It requires a reduction in hours of some critical town hall employees, as well as not replacing one of our 5 highway positions. It also requires the use of one-time funds. This budget was prepared thoughtfully by the Finance Committee and our town accountant after reviewing contractual obligations, state funding requirements, and other factors. To call this our recommended budget is inaccurate in a sense. It's what we recommend if voters decide they want to fully fund the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District budget in the absence of an override. It will result in a loss of town services and set us back years in terms of the progress we've been able to make in some departments. Funding the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District operational assessment at this level means that the baseline for Whitman-Hanson Regional School District operational assessment will be set at this level next year, which means that without an override, even more cuts will be needed to the town hall staff and town budget next year just to keep the town and the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District budget level funded. And then option 3 is kind of the wild card option. There are other limitless ways of funding this shortfall without an override that include combinations of staff and budget cuts, as well as the use of one-time cash, such as free cash. While in the moment it may feel like the right thing to do, and it may get us through this difficult time, there are pitfalls for the unwary. Both our Finance Committee and town accountant strongly advise this year, and honestly every year, against using free cash or stabilization funds as a general matter. We are already forecasting a fairly steep overall budget shortfall for next year. The use of one-time funds will draw down funds we will need to bridge our budget shortfall gap next year, while at the same time it cements the baseline for the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District operational assessment at a higher level, which we will also need to fund again next year. Thanks for listening, and thanks for attending, and I hope we end in a good place tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. The one point, as we get into the debate here, if we could, on this motion, please limit our conversation to whether or not we should reject the reassessment and keep it at that level. The question of what to cut and how to cut, or whether to use free cash or whatnot, that's really for the second motion to come. Okay, so this is more of the 30,000 feet, and then we'll get into the weeds with the second motion. So, Mr. O'Sullivan, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. Joe O'Sullivan, 625 West Washington Street. I just want to know how much money is in the assessor's overlay account.
One moment, please.
Sure.
Do we want to say how much is in free cash instead?
No.
All right. 829,000.
Even?
Well, 829, 706, 86.
I am told that that amount is $829,706.86.
I move that we transfer whatever it calls for to fund the schools as presented from that account to the school department account, and I have a second.
And, once again, I'm going to rule against that because pertaining to my previous comments, we're just moving right now whether or not to reassess.
Okay,
That motion will be perfectly in order for the second motion if this one fails.
It won't, as a point of order. The only way you can spend amount of an overlay, the assessors have to vote it at a meeting and declare it as surplus. You can't appropriate it at a town meeting.
I am told, actually, could you
Yeah.
discuss this? Thank you. We're going to hear from our town accountant. It's out of order for another reason, which he will explain.
Okay, all right. So every year, they set aside money for potential abatements and so forth. So there's like 800 and something thousand in the account. Town meeting can't appropriate that from that fund. The only way you can appropriate from that fund, if the assessors have a meeting and say, hey, we have 372,000 in surplus, and they declare it as surplus, then town meeting can spend it. So that is not an option tonight. If you thought it was too high in there and you wanted to spend it, the Board of Assessors would have to vote it as overlay surplus.
okay. Could you tell me how much they spent this year out of overlay surplus?
I'll have to check on that.
Thank you
Not
very
off
much.
the top of my head, yep.
Right, and it's not going to be in order because of the legal ramifications. I actually saw you first, so please introduce yourself.
Hillary Niffen, Gorwin Drive. I'm Hillary Niffen. I am the vice chair of the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District School Committee. I have 3 children who have attended the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District for the last 7 years, and my husband has been a teacher in the district for the last 18 years. I'm here to speak tonight about the facts regarding the school budget and the effects of not certifying one here tonight. The current FY25 proposed school budget is asking for a 3.65% increase, which puts Hanson's assessment at a 7% increase. The current FY25 proposed budget is a less than level serviced budget as we are cutting 5 positions. The school committee is not asking for anything more than to maintain the services the students already have. The Whitman-Hanson Regional School District School Committee did not ask for an override. We were asked to keep the assessment to a 5% increase or less, and despite our best efforts to do so, while still maintaining an appropriate education for our students, this was not feasible. We were able to lower the assessments to each town by cutting 5 positions and using $310,000 of our free cash, which is excess and deficiencies and circuit breaker. This totaled a reduction of $910,500. However, in order to get Hanson's assessment to 5%, the cuts would be much more significant. This would include 11 elementary teachers across the district and 4 middle school teachers only at Hanson Middle. These cuts would get the assessment to a 5.85% increase and would cut our total budget increase from a 3.65% increase to a 2% increase. There are a lot of factors that are contributing to this budget. One is the rising costs and the lack of state funds to offset those costs. For example, in FY24, special education tuition increased by 14% and charter school tuition increased by 20%. At the same time, the funds we received from the state decreased, as we were only reimbursed at 79% for transportation costs that we are mandated to pay for, and our Chapter 70 funds increased by 0%. Historical context of the district budget is also important. In FY16, the district's budget increased by 0%. In FY19, 19 positions were cut. Then the pandemic hit, and in 2021, when we received COVID aid, we were already behind in services for our students. While other districts were able to invest in infrastructure like HVAC systems or purchasing buses, Whitman-Hanson needed people. While the enrollment of our students has decreased, the populations of our students, especially those who need services that are mandated by state and federal law, such as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, has increased. The positions needed to service these populations include math and reading interventionists, English language learner staff, and special education staff. Not certifying the requested assessment will lead to a combined Hanson and Whitman town meeting, also referred to as a super town meeting, at which time the majority vote is binding. In the meantime, because we would not have a budget, the Commissioner of Education would put the district on a 1/12 budget, which means the district would receive its money monthly. This budget would likely be based on FY24's numbers, and at our June 6th meeting, in preparation for the deficit, the superintendent recommended laying off 32 teachers, 3 central office staff, and eliminating extracurricular activities in the fall, like sports and clubs. It is important to know that when the commissioner can put a district on a 1/12 budget, he has the ability to raise this figure to one higher than the FY24 approved budget or even the rejected FY25 budget. This happened in Dayton Rehoboth in 2019. Their voters rejected a budget of $44 million. In July, they were put on a 1/12, and in August of 2019, the commissioner set their budget at $45 million, nearly $1 million higher than what their voters rejected, and the towns had to pay without a choice. This is precedent that we must consider all of our options tonight. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Andrea Sapola and I live on 57 Hammond Road. I'm still confused, so I'm just looking for some clarification, and I have 2 questions. My first question is, if we vote yes, we reject the reassessment. How is that different from option 1 in here?
The way things were set up before I decided to do this motion first was that we were going to read the article that you have in front of you. Option 1 is keeping the budget exactly the same as we approved back in May. Option 2, and we would have voted on that, and option 2 would have been with the cuts. So I thought it was cleaner to just say yes or no on the reassessment, and then we'll move on to what is in the handout, or option 2.
Okay. My second question, so if we reject the reassessment, what does the school committee do then?
The answer to that is if we reject the reassessment, the school committee then can call a super town meeting, which would be a joint meeting between the towns of Hanson and Whitman. The school committee would run that meeting, and at that point, there would be a vote up or down on the assessment.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Margaret
Oh,
Kitchenham.
I'm sorry. Please, I'm sorry.
Margaret Kitchenham, 75 Fairwood Drive, Hanson, Mass. And I'm totally confused. I don't understand why you as the moderator are making a motion and not the selectmen or the finance committee. And I'd like to know on what you're proposing here, what the recommendations are from the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. I'm confused by your motion being different from what we have in our booklet.
It's perfectly good questions. As to the first part, I, as moderator, have the ability to rephrase or rework motions when I think it will make things more clear for the town meeting. And so that's what I did here. I felt like the article that was given out was confusing. And so here, it's a much easier to understand motion. I either reject the, or I vote to reject the reassessment, or I vote to accept the reassessment. And then we can always move on. But at least this makes it a little more clear. As for the recommendations of the selectmen and the finance committee, Ms. Kemet gave their recommendations, I believe. Mr. Sullivan can give the FinCom's position as well. But yes, you have another question?
I do. The motion that is in our book is in writing, and so we can read it and we can see what it says. Your motion is just sort of out there, vague and not written down, and so I don't know what I'm looking at and what I'm being asked to vote on.
You're voting on, and this is where things get very difficult. This is basically voting on option 1 as presented in the warrant in Article 1. And I felt like that was confusing. I will read the motion again before we take the vote, and I will explain what a yes vote means and what a no vote means again. But it's a simplified version of option 1 in the article. Yes, Mr. Malisi. Oh, I'm sorry.
Do we have assistance from IT to type it and put it up on the big screen as a Word document?
Can someone tell me if we're going to type this up? Is it going to be typed up? Please put it. All right, we're efforting to put the motion as I read it up on the screen.
It's not going to explain it.
Going to send this back.
Yes, I will clarify. Any other comments before we move on? Yes, ma'am.
I think Jim was first.
Oh, Mr. Hickey.
I was standing
I
first,
saw her
Mr. Moderator.
I saw her first.
My name's Jim Hickey. I live at 66 Perry Ave. And through you, Mr. Moderator, Mr. O'Sullivan, I thought made a great motion, but it's out of order. So what I would like to propose, I would like to make a motion that we table this and let the Board of Assessors meet and decide if they want to give us the $372,141.
I'm going to call on the town council.
So, under the law, when the school committee, so we're playing tennis right now. Can you hear me? No. Oh. Ready? Oops. So right now we're playing tennis, right? So the first ball came over from the school committee, 14.9. We threw the ball back at 14.6. They threw it back 14.9. We have 45 days to consider that budget. That's why we had a special town meeting rather than going back in October. We only have 45 days to react. Otherwise, it's approved regardless. And then we have to work and try to modify the budgets going forward on the town side, but the school side would be set. So the decision really should be made for tonight, one way or the other. And right now, we're talking simply option one, which is exactly the same budget that you passed in May, 14.6. So right now, if you want 14.6, you vote yes. If you want 14.9, then you vote no, and then we decide, okay, we voted no, and then we decide, can we get money from other places or whatever? That's when we're going to deal with trying to find other money. So right now, it's just 14.6, yes, or 14.9, no.
So
Is that clear?
as town council, if we table this and do not close the meeting, let the Board of Assessors meet on Thursday or Friday
Oh,
and come back and do it next Monday, we may not have to make cuts anywhere if the Board of Assessors agree to give us the 372,000.
oh, you mean so not dissolve the meeting and repost and all of that?
We would just continue it until the Board of Assessors meet. And quite frankly,
I
it would
don't
be,
know, someone would have to count the 45 days for me, and really, I don't know when that date is, Jim, honestly.
but if we don't close the meeting, we could continue it in a week. The
They
idea,
need a
Mr.
decision.
O'Sullivan had a great idea where nobody would have to lose jobs, we wouldn't have to make any cuts, and because it's out of order, we can't do it.
Yeah.
So if we table this discussion until the following week, after the Board of Assessors meet, it's possible to do this.
If we're within the 45 days, and I just don't know, someone would have to count those days for me. And then the question is,
Well, I'll still put it out there then. I would
I
like to
understand.
make a motion to table this meeting until the Board of Assessors meet.
I know.
You got a second?
You said June 22nd? All right. June 22nd is the 45th day, I'm told. So we're talking about a very tight timeline. We have a second.
I'm sorry, Mr. Moderator, the Board of Assessors could meet on Thursday and we could meet on Friday. That's how important this is.
There's no question it's important now. Is there a legality about how long we have not posted for a town meeting next week?
You gotta ask Beth.
No, for a continued time. No, Sean.
We don't have to post.
Yeah.
All right. Is there a quorum of the Board of Assessors tonight?
They have to post. Sean, you have to post.
We have to post for a meeting of the Board of Assessors. So, yeah.
They're not posted tonight. Beth just said.
Oh. They're not posted for tonight, but I'm told by town council that they don't have to post on a town meeting night. So, do we have the Board of Assessors here?
We have the assessor.
We have the assessor. Could we hear from the assessor, please?
But if the board's up here, so.
Hi, Lee Gamache. I'm the assessor for the town of Hanson till the 28th of June. But I just want to explain that overlay account. We have to carry a certain amount in that overlay account to adhere to outstanding real estate taxes that are still outstanding that haven't been paid. That also covers all the abatements that come in to the town, get paid out of that overlay account. It takes care of the senior tax abatement program that we have, the veterans tax abatement program that we have. That all comes out of the overlay account. So we can't just, it's not a fund that's just sitting there not doing anything. All this stuff comes out of there. The Board of Assessors, they meet on Monday evenings. It's very hard to get, we have two members right now, a brand-new member that just came on. So time-wise, I don't think that you're going to be able to pull this off time-wise like that, to have them come in and have them vote on it. We need to get all the outstanding amounts for the tax liabilities that we have for all the years prior to also. So on a timeline, I don't think it's going to fit in there.
Thank you. Would anybody like to speak to Mr. Hickey's motion before we move on to the general debate?
Yes.
Yes, please, come to the microphone and introduce yourself. Again, we're talking about the motion to table, not the general motion.
Oh, I want to talk about the general motion.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. O'Sullivan?
Yeah. I want to talk about the motion to table. I need to know before I can make a decision how much was actually spent of the $800,000+ this year.
Okay, the last numbers that I have, there was 183,000 last year. It averages out about 160,000. I'm not sure what the year-to-date this year is, but it averages 160,000 every year. Last year was 183,000.
Okay, so 183,000 was spent last year
Yeah.
out of $800,000 sitting in overlay account,
Correct.
which would be enough to fund without cutting any positions and also fund fully the schools as requested by the school committee.
Yep.
Thank you.
Can I just mention one thing? The one thing that Lee mentioned was you should have enough in your overlay to cover your 5-year average, which is 160. But what the DOR wants us to do is, like, if you have any outstanding receivables, like there was like $500,000 outstanding at the end of the year, they want you to have that in there as well. So they'd want you to have like $500,000 if that was receivable plus, you know, the 160 average. But that's what it is. And my other comment is that no matter what, the reason why we're not recommending the use of free cash stabilization fund or overlay is because this is a lot of work, just cutting $200,000 from the budget. Next year, it's going to be probably like $800,000, $900,000 without an override. So by doing little tricks like this, you're exasperating the problem for next year, in my opinion. But you can do whatever you want. You can use all stabilization fund, you can use free cash, overlay, but I'm just telling you, in my opinion, it's not a good idea for a plan going forward because we know what the expenses are going to be next year, and it's going to make it that much more difficult for everybody. But you're the stewards of your funds. You can do what you want with them.
Thank you. Mr. Moderator, through you, there is a history in this community of using assessors overlay account for situations like this. I believe it was the time when we had no school busing in Hanson after Proposition 2.5 was implemented in 1 year instead of over 3 years. And they did use, I believe, $400,000 out of the assessors overlay account.
Okay.
So there is a precedent for that.
All right, and I actually should have said to Mr. Hickey while he was at the microphone that for the same reason Mr. O'Sullivan's motion earlier was out of order, yours is out of order. The motion before us is just whether or not to reject the reassessment. Your motion would be in order given the second motion that I will make later. Does that make sense?
No. My motion was to table the first question that you're going to ask us to vote on. I want to table the meeting right now.
All right. Well, and again, okay. And a clarification then. Instead of tabling the motion, what we are doing would be voting on continuing the town meeting to a date certain, which you propose next week on Monday?
We can't, it's past the timeline.
Huh?
It's past the 45-day timeline.
So it has to be before June 22nd.
Which is Saturday.
Which is Saturday. So you're proposing a Saturday meeting?
Which would give the time for the assessment to meet. And as Mr. O'Sullivan just said, it could be done before. And as our town accountant just said, there would still be money in there for the...
I understand your motion. But what you're saying is you wish to continue the town meeting to Saturday,
Right.
which would be the last day of the 45 days.
Friday.
Friday. All right. So the motion is to continue the meeting until Friday. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that we have a lot of people here today. Friday evening we may not. So bear that in mind, getting a quorum. If we end up with 95 people and we're up here calling people on our cell phones to try and get a quorum, that's going to be a very difficult thing.
I'll make sure you get 100. You're talking 72.
Okay, Mr. Hickey, Mr. Hickey. Mr. Hickey, please. A majority vote is necessary to continue the meeting to June 21st, which would be Friday. All those in favor of continuing the town meeting till Friday signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Nay. The noes have it. Yes, ma'am.
Diane Cohen, 767 Pleasant Street, through you, Mr. Moderator, to the school committee member that just spoke. I noticed that a lot of the services that are being cut are in direct service to children, and I know that their job is not easy. So I just wondered if there were any other considerations, maybe at the administration level, that were considered being cut.
Would anybody like to speak to that question? Oh, I would recognize Superintendent Simonek.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Yes, so in this, it's a potential cut if we don't have a budget. So looking at without a budget as of July 1st, as Ms. Niffen said, we go on a 1/12. That's $2.5 million that we're in a deficit. And we also then have to come up with unemployment costs, because as of July 1st, all my teachers who are in their association by contract have to be notified by June 30th. So they're eligible for unemployment at 40%, which raises that number up to 3.3. Those cuts don't go into effect unless we don't have a budget by the time teachers come in August. Okay? And I also put up 3 district-wide positions that totaling a little over $400,000. Trying to get to $3.3 million is not easy. It's 26 to 33 teachers. It's 26 RIFs, or reduction in force notifications, that will go out tomorrow if we don't have that. And 6 positions that are already vacant are not going to be filled. So the point here, if we don't have a budget, those are potential cuts if we get to August. I can fund our budget in July. I can also fund our budget up until August 26th. I will not be able to make payroll if there is no budget within the town. And again, as Ms. Niffen said, if a no vote or a yes vote on one, I'm trying to make sure I'm not confused. If we don't decide on a budget today, if the assessment is set from the May town meeting, those RIF notifications go out and will stay until we do have a budget. And within 14 days of the school committee then setting a super town meeting or a district meeting, those will still be in effect. So yeah, we're looking at soup to nuts from a paraprofessional to a senior leadership position being reduced in force.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
How many leadership positions and what are they?
So I'm not at liberty to say because I don't want to put people on. I haven't let teachers know who those positions are. I'm trying to save as many positions as I can using as much salary as I can without going against seniority.
I just wanted to make sure that direct service to children was not the first option being cut.
So on that notification too, I do have to look at what the law says and with between our English language learner position and our special education positions, those are direct services that I'm trying not to reduce at all.
Okay, and please wait until you're recognized. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Emer McDonough, 15 West Washington Street. I was in Beacon Hill with a lot of the realtors this week talking to our legislators who are actually against this law, our 2 senators, because it's going to bring everybody's tax bill up. And the reason they're against this is the way the government is enforcing it by taking money away from the towns. It's not, if the government did it properly, but they are taking money away from the towns because we didn't vote yes for it. And that's why Hanover has voted no. A lot of towns on the commuter rail have voted no.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's a different issue.
All right.
But thank you. Any other questions or comments on my motion? Mr. Heel. Is it working?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
One thing to note is if we vote to fund the 300,000 something this year, next year, the rate increase includes the 300,000 that we made this year. So this is not just a one-year vote. This is perpetual. So if you vote yes to raise it to the 10% of the 8%, whatever it is, that is built into next year's budget. So it's just going to get even worse next year.
All right, and seeing no one else at the microphones, once again, I'm going to restate my motion, which has already been seconded. I believe it's up on the board. I move to reject the reassessment submitted by the Regional School Committee and reaffirm the budget as originally approved on Article 5 of the May 6, 2024 annual town meeting as printed as option 1, column 2 of the budget handout. Again, oh, yes, I'm sorry, ma'am.
Margaret Kitchenham, 75 Fairwood Drive. I would still like on your motion to have a recommendation from the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. I'd like to know what they recommend we do.
Fair enough. And in response, I will recognize Mr. Sullivan.
Good evening. Yes, the mandate of the Finance Committee is to produce a balanced budget. And so, in accordance with our mandate, we have presented 2 balanced budgets. We don't recommend or not recommend. Our mandate is to provide the budget. So we have provided, the town has voted twice now for option 1. Option 1 is what we put forth as one budget. Option 2 is a carefully thought out coordination with the town hall to reduce the services should that come forward. So we have 2 options. Both are equally valid depending on the decision of the voters.
Ms. Kemet.
On this motion right now, yes or no on this motion?
The question is does the Finance Committee have a recommendation on this motion?
We have presented a balanced budget in accordance with option 1 as printed in the warrant. It is a balanced budget. That's what we're voting on, option 1.
Ms. Kemet.
And the Select Board is aligned with the Finance Committee. We've presented 2 options, and it's up to the voters to make that decision.
Very good. So, once again, if you vote yes on my motion, you will reject the reassessment submitted by the school committee, and the budget will stay exactly the way it was passed in May. If you vote no, then we will not reject that reassessment, and we will move on to another motion.
Still don't understand.
Pardon me? Yes. A yes vote probably means we will go to a super town meeting between the 2 towns. A no vote means that we will explore other options to fund the schools as requested. Yes, ma'am. Yes, this evening.
Could you please repeat the dollar values associated with the 2 options that will be allocated to the school district as our general counsel did? So the 14.6 with option 1 and the 14.9 with option 2, if I'm correct in remembering it, could you just repeat that? I think it would help all of us.
I think I can do that.
It's right in the warrant.
Yeah, it's in the warrant. And the amount that we voted on back in May, and that if you vote yes on this motion, we will keep, is $14,602,595. If, however, we reject this motion and then vote to fund the school committee as it requested, we will be funding the schools at $14,974,736. So, all those in favor of motion of Article 1, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Nay. The chair is in doubt. So, all those in favor of Article 1, please signify by raising your blue card at this time. Please keep them up until the tellers clearly tell you to put them down.
Thank you.
Mr. Campbell?
4545.
Ms. Arena?
18?
Mr. Moderator.
54. All those opposed to the motion, please signify by raising your cards at this time.
Thank you.
Ms. Arena?
48.
48. Mr. Campbell?
88. 88.
Already passed. Already passed.
I know. Mr. Hayes?
72, Mr. Moderator.
Did not. Yeah.
All right, by a vote of 117 to 208, the motion is defeated. Article 2, or I'm sorry, Article 1, Motion 2. I move to see if the town will vote to rescind its approval of the town's operating budget under Article 5 of the May 6, 2024 annual town meeting, and to determine what sums of money the town will raise and appropriate by taxation, transfer from free cash, transfer from town ambulance funds, water department revenue, water surplus, Title V special revenue fund, MWPAT loan repayments, receipts reserved for appropriation, conservation notice of intent fund, overlay surplus, and fund balance reserved for reduction of future excluded debt to defray charges and expenses of the town, including debt and interest, and to provide for a reserve fund for the 2025 fiscal year, or to take any other action in relation thereto. Do I have a second? Seconded. Mr. Sullivan.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Now that we've taken our first vote, we are moving on to option 2, which is highlighted in your handout this evening. I just wanted to let all of you know that the budget process is roughly a 7 to 8 month process, starting in the fall, working our way all the way through the winter, culminating in the spring here at town meeting. This year, we've used over approximately $692,000 of free cash to support our budget. We have set certain reductions in funding in this budget in option 2 to leave us enough free cash to essentially do the same thing next year, which would be to continue at the current services we have. There have been some reductions. They're all there in plain view for everyone to see. I urge you all to pass this budget in omnibus and not tinker with any of the lines. We have worked with the town administrator, the town accountant, the town hall departments to craft this budget that works. We have looked at every scenario possible. We've been asked about stabilization. I can tell you right now, our stabilization sits at 4%. The state of Massachusetts requires, for good bonding, your stabilization to be between 5 and 15%. We don't have technically the amount to have a perfect bond rating. We are going to have bonding issues if we dip into stabilization. That's not available. Believe me, if there was an option to tap into any of these funds, we would have done it. Stabilization is not an option. We need to leave the remaining approximate $700,000 worth of free cash to keep town hall going, to keep the town going next year. We were able to avoid any reductions in public safety. There's no reductions in our fire department. There's no reductions in our police department. Public safety is paramount to the finance committee, and unfortunately, there's just not that many people at town hall. It's just a fact of the matter. We had to make some very difficult decisions that no one is happy about, but I urge you to accept option 2 in its entirety without any adjustments. All the money that is set aside for what will be free cash going forward after the expenditure of the free cash in this budget will be needed to run the town next year. If it's not, if we dip into free cash, if we use more free cash, the override gets bigger. And if the override gets bigger, we can't stop it eventually, right? If the override is so large, it's as the superintendent discussed. Next year, if we're trying to overcome a $2 million deficit, we have no choice but to lay off firemen, policemen. A fireman and a policeman, unfortunately, if you break it down to numbers, is about $90,000 to $95,000 per person. It becomes a matter of numbers. I urge you, you've all spoken and moved on to option 2. I ask that you accept option 2 as it is presented in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Margaret Westfield, State Street. I move the town vote to take $144,749 from the stabilization fund for the following line items on the FY25 budget. Line 141, assessors, $11,309. Line 145, treasurer collectors, $4,800. Line 171, conservation commission, $22,516. Line 420, highway, $44,550. Line 430, solid waste, $20,670. Line 511, health, $26,630. And line 610, library, $14,274. These figures represent a reduction of services.
Oh, one moment, please. Do we have a second on your motion? Second. And so this is a motion to amend the
Article 2. These figures represent a reduction of services in departments at the Town Hall, Library, and Highway, which will cause a reduction of operating hours and manpower. This amendment will prevent an increase in taxes and cut to services for our residents, while still keeping our stabilization account with an estimated $1.3 million.
Mr. Sullivan.
Again, I will reiterate, we are below the state and bonding agency recommendations for stabilization. If you reduce it even more, it is going to cost us more to borrow money. Whether or not you are all aware of it, South Shore Tech is building a new school. We are going to be on the hook for approximately $1.2 million in the spring. We have to borrow that money. It's going to cost us more to borrow that money if we continue to degrade our bond rating. Do not, I am deeply sorry for those people who are having a reduction in hours. It is an unfortunate circumstance we were in. But do not, I urge you, do not dip into stabilization. We are already below the recommended number. It's only going to hurt us in the long run. These choices we're making in the moment are affecting us 2 to 3 years down the road.
And I would also point out that a 2/3 vote is necessary to tap into stabilization. So, Mr. Pasqua-Egan.
No, I'm not at the mic. I'm considering my options.
Oh, okay, very good. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Julie Rothar Sanders, East Washington Street. I think it would be really beneficial. So you're saying not to tap into that budget, and I think it would be helpful for everybody into the room to know what our percentage on loans would cost, right? So what is the rate and what would the rate change to? I think the only way that we can vote on an accurate budget is that we be as educated as you are, sir, because right now you're you seem very upset. Sorry to the moderator. You seem very upset, and I think the more educated this group can be, the better outcome we can have. Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan.
So because I don't run a bank or lend money, I don't have exact percentages. But it's just like with your personal credit rating, right? If you have bad credit, it's going to cost you more to borrow money, or you're going to get a higher interest rate.
But there's a difference between somebody having a credit rate of 450 and somebody having a credit rate of 650 and somebody having a credit rate of 750, and that all changes, right? And so I get it. But when you're talking about that percentages are going to change, it would be beneficial to the audience in this room to know that percent and just instead of saying vote blindly on this.
I'm not saying vote blindly.
Mr. Sullivan.
I'm saying we're below the limit. We're already below it. It's 5 to 15%. We're at 4%. I don't run a bank. I don't run a borrowing agency. I can't give anyone $1 million. But when it comes to the spring and we have to borrow $1 million to build South Shore Tech because the signs are showing that the other 9 to 14 towns are going to approve it, it's going to cost us more. That is something outside of my control. It's like asking me what Rockland Trust charges. I don't know.
Yeah, just real briefly, I think part of the frustration too is that nobody knows what the interest rate is going to be next spring. I mean, it all depends on the Fed, it depends on the world economy. I mean, not knowing what exactly is going to happen, it's going to be a decision made then. I'm not even sure that a ballpark is available. Mr. Malisi, this time it's Mr. Malisi.
I thought I was going to have to present myself, Mr. Campbell.
No.
Frank Malisi, 604 Brook Street. I just want to remind people the projects that we have coming up over the next couple of years. We have the library, we have the highway department, we have obviously South Shore VOTEC, we have a feasibility study for the fire department coming up. All of that requires borrowing money. If you use the stabilization, the free cash, and I wish free cash was named something different than free cash because it's not free. It's essentially the emergency fund for the town, same thing with stabilization. You're going to be paying a lot more than $372,000 over the next 20 years in the additional percentage that you'd have to pay in interest. You're going to cost the town money. Yeah, it might not be right now, but it's like paying for it on a credit card. Please do not touch stabilization or free cash in this budget. I understand it hurts, but the reduction of hours is a reduction of hours. Nobody's getting taken off of the payroll. And hopefully next year we're in a better situation to put their hours back to where it belongs.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Margaret Kitchenham, 75 Fairwood Drive. If I know we'll be having a meeting in October. In October, could we choose to take money from I forget what the fund was, and transfer it to the stabilization fund, the assessors, the surplus overlay? Yeah, could we take money in October and transfer it to the
That would be
Mr. Sullivan.
That would be a purview of the Board of Assessors. You would have to ask them. I don't know. They don't have to release it. They don't have to designate it as surplus. You would have to attend an assessors meeting, talk to the Board of Assessors, request that. Perhaps they've heard it here tonight from several of the town, but I can't say for sure that those funds will be available, ma'am.
It could happen, yes.
Sure. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Pasqua.
Kathy Pasqua-Egan, 63 Montponton Street, Hanson. I have a question. Is there such a thing as the reserve fund for 2025, somewhere around 120,000, and a leftover, I guess, reserve fund from 2024, around 90,000, and even some monies that went unused back in 2022, also called a reserve fund. Is that a way that we eventually, after we spend out of that, it goes to free cash? And could any of those, if they still exist, be used tonight for that purpose of funding our schools?
Mr. Sullivan.
So the reserve fund exists. Every year we vote a certain sum of money to the reserve fund, which is used by the finance committee to satisfy departmental requests that come up during the year. For instance, the police department might need an HVAC repair to the tune of $15,000 that does not exist in their budget, right? They didn't budget for it. Or another department needs 10 grand. The reserve fund is used to fund those requests. At the end of the year, whatever's in the reserve fund automatically goes into free cash. That's what free cash is. Free cash is what's left over. So you don't see it. It happens behind the scenes, but the town accountant will certify free cash. So right now we have about $91,000 in the reserve fund to last us through the end of June. We have a few potential requests that could be coming down, hopefully not too significant, but that process happens every year. There is no extra reserve fund. The reserve fund at the end of the year, what's left becomes free cash. So it's already estimated in our number.
Yes, ma'am. Do you have a comment?
Hi there, I'm Molly McLennan, Squantum Avenue. I've seen since coming to town in 2017, how we're kind of continuously behind the financial 8-ball. And while times are very challenging for all of us, my home is my single greatest asset. And so I don't want to see school district or other departments suffer budget cuts. If there's something wrong with my house, I invest more money to fix it. I'm wondering why raising taxes isn't being discussed. I know we had this whole conversation previously in the year, but I do look at what a small sum of money this is and think about when it's dispersed over the entirety of the population, how this becomes, while not desirable, maybe more tenable than having to cut some of these other positions. And I've seen as a taxpayer, if you need to replace the septic system, you got to go and have appointments with people. If you want to get married, you got to go have appointments with people. And having these positions in our town hall moved from, full-time to part-time or part-time to even fewer part-time hours, it affects all of us. And we may not have personally experienced the need for some of these offices yet, but we saw how hard fought the budget for these different positions was during the first assessment. And here we are looking at cutting things that were so hard fought for just a short time ago.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan.
So the town of Hanson taxes up to its levy limit. We are limited by the Proposition 2.5 override that says we cannot go above that amount. So a cap is put on the number. So we can't just say, hey, we're going to tax 10%, right? Proposition 2.5 exists so that small towns couldn't be overtaxed. So when we put forth an override, what we're saying is we are looking to go beyond that 2.5%. So every time the town votes down an override, they're saying they don't want higher taxes. So the only way to raise taxes beyond what the current levy is would be to submit a Proposition 2.5 override, which we tried. It was voted down.
I think this meeting might be better attended. I'm not entirely sure, but.
It doesn't matter. You can't do a Proposition 2.5 override at a town meeting. It's a two-part process. You need a vote at town meeting and a town-wide ballot, which it was rejected at both. So next year, when there's an override proposed, it would be, that's how you would go above the tax levy.
Okay. So message to everyone here is come back. Okay, it's a good thing. My second question is, we had spoken earlier in the evening about waiting for the Board of Assessors to meet. Is that a requirement? Because I don't know, of these other proposed cuts, was everyone given the opportunity to meet and consider and consent? Why are we treating the assessors' budget differently?
Mr. Sullivan.
It's not their budget. It's the overlay.
I'm sorry.
They are the only one, the Board of Assessors is the only ones who can designate that as surplus. For the reasons that the town assessor gave, you cannot just designate it at a town meeting. It's a law. It has to be done by the Board of Assessors. So if the Board of Assessors meets between now and October and they want to designate a certain amount of the surplus, they can do that. But we have no power over it. The only people who have the power over it are the Board of Assessors.
Okay. Thank you so much for those two clarifications.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Pasqua-Egan.
Hi, Kathy DePasqua-Egan, 63 Mount Ponset Street. I would like to make a motion that we take whatever is in the reserve fund and some from free cash and combine them together to be the amount of $372,000, whatever it is, and vote on that to fund our school budget.
Well, There's already a motion in place right now to take that amount out of stabilization.
Okay, I defer to that motion.
Okay, very good. So seeing no other people at the microphones, all those in favor of the motion before the town meeting, and again, 2/3 vote, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Oh.
I just want to clarify, it's $144,749. It's not the full school budget that I want to move out of stabilization to save the positions in the town that would be cut.
And that motion is made by Peggy Westfield from State Street. Not the bank, but the street in town. All right. So the motion is to take $144,749 from stabilization. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Nay. The nays have it, and it does not pass by the required 2/3 vote.
I'm back. Margaret Westfield, State Street. I move the town to vote and take $144,749 from a free cash to fund for the following line items in the FY25 budget. Line 141 assesses $11,309. Line 145, treasurer collector, $4,800. Line 171, Conservation Commission, $22,516. Line 420, Highway, $44,550. Line 430, Solid Waste, $20,670. Line 511, Health, $26,630. Line 610, Library, $14,274. These figures represent a reduction of services in town departments at Town Hall, Library.
Oh, I'm sorry, one moment, Ms. Westfield. Do we have a second to your motion? Seconded. Do you need the name of the person who seconded it, Beth? Okay, very good. Mr. Hayes seconded it. Ms. Westfield.
These figures represent a reduction of services in departments at Town Hall, Library, and Highway, which will cause a reduction of operating hours and manpower. This amendment will prevent an increase in taxes and cuts to services for our residents while still keeping our free cash account, which is estimated at $482,251.
Mr. Sullivan.
If we remove any more money from free cash, those positions that we're reducing in hours will not exist next year. We need a minimum of, we're using about $700,000 in free cash right now to fund the operating budget. That means I need another $700,000 of free cash next year to fund the bare minimum. If you use free cash anymore, those positions will go away entirely, or some of them. So we are reducing the hours of many of the positions to keep people on board. If you use free cash right now, they'll be gone next year. There's no coming back. Free cash is only what is left in the budget. It's not this imaginary pool of money that's replenished, right? So if you expend all the free cash now, there's none left for next year. So we have set aside, in accordance with the town accountant, despite what you might have heard from your friends in Whitman, we need $700,000 of free cash to apply to the operating budget for FY26, or those people will be gone.
Anyone else with a comment or question on this motion? Oh, Mr. Young, could you please come to the microphone?
I recommend that you go along.
Mr. Young, if you could introduce yourself.
Bruce I. Young, 594 Indian Head Street, Hanson, Mass., USA. I really don't have a problem with the motion on the floor, because the town accountant will tell you that each year when free cash is certified, okay, it's usually recertified and approved by the state for over $1 million. There's a reason for that I won't go into, but I think the finance committee chairman knows what it is and where that money comes from every year. And certainly the chairman of the selectmen knows where that money comes from every year. It comes from E&D, excess and deficiency, which is the overage of what we have raised, what we have budgeted, less what is actually spent during the year. And actually, I should correct the member of the Finance Committee. The state recommends that the combination of the total of stabilization and free cash should be a certain percentage to protect your bond rating. It's not just stabilization, and I'm sure the town accountant will agree with me on that one. But that's the story. And so to protect those particular individuals whose hours are going to be reduced and some people could be eliminated, I would suggest that you go along with this free cash figure. Every year, the free cash, and even in the interim in October, usually the free cash is recertified for over $1 million. So I really don't have any problems with this figure, given the history of the recertification of free cash. And the town accountant will tell you what free cash is usually recertified for in May and in October. So knowing that, and I've been around town government a long time, I don't have any problem with this motion. And it's going to save some positions and save the services at Town Hall. I'll give you an example. The transfer station there's two individuals that are affected at the transfer station. They work for the highway department. They're part of the highway department union. They're going to go from 40 hours back to 32 hours, which means in the highway contract, they will be going back to a part-time position, which means that their benefits will be affected as well, because their benefits can, if they're part-time, are figured on a pro rata basis. So that operation runs with two people. We're cutting it back to from 5 days to 4 days, reducing their hours. And in their union contract, they're supposed to work a 40-hour week. It's in the union contract. So I don't know how we can renegotiate with the highway union on town meeting floor. I'd have to ask the selectmen whether they've negotiated that with the highway department to cut those two people's hours back to 32 hours.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Before I recognize Mr. Sullivan, Town Council, do you want to address Ms. Fedoroff?
Yeah, my question is, how do we do this on town meeting floor where we haven't negotiated with the highway department, with highway union?
Yeah, so the way it works is in any sort of budgetary situation, you set the budget and then you determine what kind of cuts you're going to make, and then you impact bargain with the union. So the town meeting through the budgetary process makes the decision on how much money to expend, and then we on the management side negotiate an impact bargain with the union thereafter. So it's all normal process, and we already have met preliminarily with the expectation that maybe this wouldn't, the school funding wouldn't pass, but they're well aware and we're prepared and ready to bargain as is required by law.
And then to your other point, Mr. Young, Mr. Sullivan.
So I asked, where are those two highway, before, up to the point where we do that and negotiations are successful, where are those two transfer station members going to work in the highway department? Because they're supposed to work 40 hours a week.
Ms. Fedoroff.
So of course, everyone's fully funded until July, and then we give the notices and we impact bargain. It might not be that those two particular transfer station members are affected. We'll have to negotiate with them, but we have a deadline of July 1st, and we're going to meet that deadline.
Well, they are affected if we vote this.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure. Every one of those budgets
Correct.
that's being cut is going to have to be dealt with because there's personnel actions that result.
Yes, that includes the administrative professionals union too.
It does.
Yeah.
Mr. Sullivan.
The recommendation of the Finance Committee is in agreement with the town accountant. The town accountant is the one who is also suggesting that we do not use any more free cash than we have already used. So despite what you believe to be your knowledge of what he thinks, these are his recommendations as well. We are synced up with the town accountant. He has recommended that we do not use any more free cash. I mean, I'm sure Eric can get up here and speak to it if he wants, but free cash isn't free. You know what it is, Bruce. It's the remnants that's left over. What we're doing is we're trimming the budget in hopes of saving these positions from them going away permanently. This is a fix to get us moving forward again.
How did they
So
go?
we're looking at other, Mr. O'Sullivan brought up an interesting point tonight about the assessors, right? So if the assessors want to meet and give back money, this is something that can be readdressed at town meeting another time in October or at the next one. But right now, if you use this free cash, there will not be enough to maintain these positions. It's a matter of dollars and cents. Either that or, and I know, Mr. Young, I don't want to speak for you, but I don't think you'll be in favor of a $3 million override next year. So I think if we trim the budget now to make it reasonable, it's incredibly unfortunate. No one takes pleasure in this. This is, people's livelihoods we're affecting. But it is necessary for the overall well-being and financial stability of the town to trim it now and save what we can for next year.
Mr. Young, if you want to comment, you don't have.
No, it's all right. He obviously disagrees with the history of recertification of free cash. I don't know if the town accountant will speak to that, but normally the recertifications of free cash come out to well over $1 million every time we do it. And there's a history on that. Mr. Sullivan knows that. Town accountant knows that. And they know where the money comes from too, and so don't I.
Okay. We have a move to vote. Seconded. All those in favor of Ms. Westfield's motion to take $144,749 from free cash for the following line items, which she enumerated. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
The nays have it. The motion is defeated. Mr. Malisi.
2 questions. Second one depends on the first one. Is it possible for the town meeting to remove monies from the Recreation Enterprise Fund? Because that's more of a question for town council.
So unfortunately not, because an enterprise account can only be used, those monies can only be used to fund the enterprise. So like your water and sewer bill, well, you guys don't have sewer, but your water bill, for example, that may have different users than the taxpayers. So the water bill gets funded by fees, same thing with the recreation. So because it's an enterprise account, you can't do the reverse unless there was a debt to the general fund from the enterprise account for other services.
Okay, thank you.
So the motion before town meeting at this point is our original one, which has been seconded, to redo the budget with the numbers in column 2, or option 2 in your handout, which are the reduced amounts proposed by the Finance Committee and the Selectmen. All those in favor of accepting the article as read with option 2 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Nay. The ayes have it. The article is adopted. And with that, thank you very much for your patience. It was a kind of a confusing night, but I think we made it. I now adjourn the town meeting sine die.
Bye, Dad.